Hello and Happy New Year 2023. I'm Stefan Greber, project leader for LXD, and in this video we're going to be taking a quick look at what to expect over the next few months of 2023. As a reminder, Canonical, for whom most of the LXD team works, plans its work to be aligned with Ubuntu releases on a 6-month cadence. The current development cycle started towards the end of October, early November, and will last until May. So that's what we're looking at, and that's what we refer to here as the 2304 cycle. Now, some of the highlights we're really looking forward to for this year are going to be a bunch of continued improvements to LXD. That means better virtual machine support, better clustering, better networking, better storage. This impacts a lot of different features, but also with keeping up with what's being added to the Linux kernel and enjoyed across both containers and virtual machine communities. More concretely, what we're expecting to see are much easier clusters in LXD, thanks to work we've done around MicroSafe, MicroCloud, and the soon-to-be-released MicroOVN, as well as quite a lot of improvements and nice additions, especially related to networking. One of my favorite highlights there is the work we've been doing around network acceleration, specifically making use of new features like VDPA to allow for very fast, very easy support of offloaded network to virtual machines. So effectively offering up to 100 or even 200 gigabit networking to virtual machines. This might feel a bit niche, and it is, but for anyone who's running a small scale cluster at the edge for something like a CDN or something like that, it's really, really nice to have. And even for someone who's not running extremely demanding workloads, just the ability to offload as much as possible to the existing capable hardware you've got in your system means more CPU to do normal workloads. So we're really quite excited about that kind of work to kind of squeeze as much performance as possible out of systems. Anyway, what I wanted to do with this video is kind of go through some of the work we're planning on releasing by effectively the end of May 2023. There can always be some surprises. Some stuff can always take longer. Some stuff might not ship in the exact way we're planning them to be right now. But that should give you a bit of an idea as to what direction we're going in. I also want to remind everyone that we tend to prioritize bugs and regressions and everything over everything else. So that doesn't mean that we're not going to be working on anything else. We always look at GitHub issues and solve those. This is kind of just the bigger ticket items that we'll be working on. All right, so let's look at what we have. So for LXD itself, the first thing we've been working on for quite a while already, it started as something simple and it's getting more and more complex, but I think we like the general direction this is going in, is what we refer to as the deployments API. This started, last time we were talking about the roadmap on video, as a feature called, I believe it was just instance groups and auto-scaling. So now it's done something a bit more complex, but the general idea is still the same, where we want the ability to create a set of instances that can dynamically be scaled up or down depending on demand, and where the workloads themselves can have some input as far as how loaded they are and whether they could do with spare capacity or not. So this is still the same general idea, but we've been looking at making it more flexible in general and trying to get it more into the idea of self-driven software. The next big piece is related to virtual machine, and that's support for online VM live migration. So LXD already supports live migration in the sense that you can move a virtual machine between one machine and another, and that virtual machine will not be actually restarted. Everything that's running inside of the VM will keep on running. But the actual amount of time the VM is offline for is, well, can be quite long, especially if you're not using Ceph for storage. So what we want to do here with the online VM live migration feature is actually having both the source and destination systems talk during the migration so that the workload can be kept running up until the absolute last minute, at which point we just send over whatever is left of VM state, so usually the memory, and then can resume the workload almost instantly. This will be quite nice. That should get us kind of to parity with a lot of other solutions in that space. Next up is support for OpenID Connect. You might remember that LXD right now, if you want to do centralized authentication on it, you need to use Candid, which is another canonical project that implements macaroon-based authentication. It's been working pretty well. It does support integrating with a number of external systems and generally has been working well enough for those who need to use that. But it's not really an industry standard by any stretch. And we are actually looking at moving to a much more standard stack for both authentication and authorization. So this cycle, we are doing the first step by adding OpenID Connect alongside Candid for authentication. This won't do any kind of RBAC or permission control and that kind of stuff at this point. It's purely just authentication. But the idea is that we will be looking at also doing authorization in the next cycle. Now, the next thing on the list is confidential computing. It's something that's really quite interesting for virtual machines. And we want to kind of start looking at that in LXD. This cycle, we're going to be kind of doing the minimum we can there to have something, which is to enable encrypted memory, especially on AMD. So that's AMD SEV. And that should be pretty straightforward to do. QEMU has supported that for a little while. What we won't do yet is any more advanced work on confidential computing. So we won't really provide any kind of remote attestation capability or support for full disk encryption or that kind of stuff. You can do some of that yourself. LXD virtual machines, as they are using UEFI and can easily get a VTPM attached, are technically capable of doing TPM-based attestation. If you add a VTPM, our firmware is already built and configured to do TPM measurements of various pieces of the stack on boot. So if you can then set things up to do remote attestation to a server you control, you can get attestation logs for your system, which I guess if you combine with your own full disk encryption within the VM, might get you close enough to a confidential VM. This is not really something that LXD facilitates directly right now, and something we want to be improving over the next few cycles. This cycle, what we're really looking at is putting the memory encryption piece in place within our QEMU config. The next piece we're working on is instance scheduling. That's something that people have been requesting a fair bit. Within a cluster, LXD kind of just picks the system with the fewest instances and dumps the new instance there, and that's kind of the end of it. You can do manual placement by using --target on the command line, and you can even use groups, and you can restrict individual projects to specific machines. There's quite a few options there, but at the end of the day, the actual placement logic of LXD is still of the servers that are available to the user, which one has the fewest instance, okay, go ahead, put it there. We're going to be improving that a bit by allowing uploading a scriptlet. So it kind of looks like a bit of Python that you can put inside of the LXD config. This will then be run by LXD whenever it needs to figure out where to put something. And that script will then be exposed a number of functions that it can use to retrieve additional data on the systems available. So that makes it possible to, for example, get more information around load, storage, memory, CPU, that kind of stuff on all of the available systems, as well as what other instances they may be running, and then have the script make a more informed decision as to where it wants a given workload to go. So that's going to be quite interesting. We're, I think, pretty far already on that particular piece of work. And that should make it quite a bit more flexible for folks to really configure LXD to place things where they want them. All right, the next one I already mentioned a bit earlier, that's the VDPA piece of work. So that's the support for the new way of doing offloading of networking for virtual machines effectively. We already support SRIOV offload on OVN. Now we'll be adding VDPA. The visible difference between the two is that with SRIOV, you pass in a full PCI device into the guest. So the guest sees that it is like a Mellanox or Intel or Broadcom card, which then makes it hard to live migrate because you'd need to hard remove that PCI device and plug it back in, which then causes a bunch of reconfiguration of the instance. And also your target system might use a different vendor, which also causes issues. With VDPA, things are a bit different. Instead, the guest always sees a Virtio network card. It doesn't know what the physical card is, and it's just the send and receive queues that are directly mapped to the hardware queues within the card. So you still get the same physical throughput, effectively. So like no CPU used on the host or any of that kind of stuff, but with what looks like a virtualized network card within the guest, which then makes it possible to detach from the physical card attached to a virtual one on the host, allowing for live migration and also allowing for, effectively being able to reconfigure the card without the guest noticing anything. So that's going to be really quite nice. It's something we're quite looking forward to having in LXD, and we expect that this should eventually take over from SRIOV for the specific use case of OVN. Another thing that's been requested a fair bit with cluster users, especially when they have Ceph set up, is the ability to do automated healing. So say you're running a cluster of 5 systems or something like that, and one of them dies. It would be kind of neat to just tell LXD, hey, once a cluster member has been dead for, I don't know, a couple of minutes, just go ahead and move its instances to other systems and start them back up. That's possible when you've got distributed storage because you didn't actually lose any data by that system going down. All you lost is the running state because the instance is no longer running. So LXD will be able to do that. We will make that opt-in and with a configurable timeout because we don't want to be too aggressive there. Like a system could have temporary network issues or similar issues, and we don't want that to kick in and start, just moving stuff around when the system is not actually completely dead. So that's going to be quite useful too. Again, when we think of those kind of smaller clusters at the edge, like the fewest manual actions are required, the better. And so the combination of this feature along with the more flexible scheduler means that LXD will be able to effectively perform evacuations and reshuffling and stuff itself as needed with pretty much no user intervention required. And lastly, something we've been doing for quite a while and we're seeing some really good results has been the documentation reorg. So going through each of the different aspects of LXD and reworking the documentation to be more complete and also following the same pattern so that it's easier to find things in our documentation. We've already done that for things like network storage. Now instances are mostly done. Looking at other things like clustering has been done. We're looking at doing images and projects and a few other topics over this cycle. Really hoping that we can wrap it up so that we will effectively have all the documentation reorganized so we can then kind of switch gear and work on adding documentation content instead of just reorganizing what we already have. That will be really quite welcome. It will let us look at what people struggle with the most and then go and help by making sure documentation is covering those topics and that everything is easy to find. So that's pretty much everything for LXD itself. Next, we've got the LXD charm that we use for those using Juju to deploy LXD and to integrate LXD with a variety of different things. The two things we're doing this cycle, one is integrating with the new canonical observability stack, which is called COS. We support currently integrating the LXD charm with Prometheus and with Grafana, but those are the old version of the stack. So now we're working with the new version. There's a bunch of different things to do. As part of that integration, we're also making it possible to relate the LXD charm with Loki, so that the LXD logs automatically pushed to Loki. This is gonna make things a bit tighter. We also want to go back to the Grafana dashboard that we published for LXD to add Loki, some of the Loki panels and stuff there, so that everything is all in one place and makes it easier to get like a nice dashboard of what's going on within a LXD cluster. The other piece is that currently the charms for LXD have been based on 2004, so now we've added support for 2204. This is actually a piece we've completed already. Alrighty, next up is MicroCloud. This is something we announced over, just before the holidays. It's effectively a bunch of snaps that we've made to make it very easy to deploy Ceph and then to deploy LXD and Ceph. So that's the MicroCeph and the MicroCloud snap specifically. But there's a bunch more work we're doing around that. Currently, MicroCloud only deploys with remote storage using Ceph. We want to fix that and make it possible to also add some local storage. That seems pretty obvious, but it just wasn't a priority when we developed this thing, so we're going to be adding that this cycle. So that when you bootstrap your MicroCloud, you can pick what disks go to local storage, what disks go to remote storage, and you end up with both options within LXD. The other piece we're working on is MicroOVN, which will work very similarly to what MicroCeph does and will be a very easy way to deploy an oven controller and central services, so that LXD can then have distributed networking as well. So it will work the exact same way we've done with MicroCeph. We'll first push out a MicroOVN snap that you can install on any systems. Once clustered together, it will distribute the API services and the actual chassis and switches across, and that will then integrate with the MicroCloud snap, so that when you create a new MicroCloud, MicroOVN also gets deployed and configured all in one pass, making it effectively extremely easy to deploy a full LXD cluster with Ceph and Oven in place. So that's kind of the focus for us over the next few months there. Then on our database side, so Dqlite, there's quite a bit going on there. Very little that's actually impacting LXD, because LXD has been very happy with the way Dqlite works for a while. But we're working on making Dqlite more consumable by others, especially looking at those that are currently using CQLite directly from C, whether it's like IoT use cases or others. So we're really trying to put a bunch more, make it a bunch more useful to a bunch more people. To do that, there's some logic we need to move around. So it's effectively moving logic we currently have from within Go Dqlite over to the C library, libdqlite. That includes role management and fair domains that are currently effectively client concepts within the Go Dqlite that really have to be more global concepts within Dqlite itself. So we're moving that. That will then unblock effectively creating a new C client library. Currently, Dqlite itself is written in C, but the only client that exists for it is a Go client. So that's a bit of a weird design we have going on right now. After this change, we will have a C client library that will look very much like CQLite, making it easy for anyone who's currently dealing with a C code base to move over to Dqlite. Similarly, having a C client library means that bindings are going to be pretty easy. So it will be much easier to use Dqlite from something like Python or Java or Ruby or anything. So that's going to be pretty exciting. Dqlite grew support for a disk-based backend to really reduce its memory consumption over the past few months. And to make that work better, we need to do some work around snapshot streaming, so that very large databases can't end up kind of deadlocking as snapshots are being sent across the wire. So that's another piece of work that's happening right now, where effectively we can chunk the snapshots and then send those chunks at the same time as we're performing other actions, so that we don't have any deadlocks possible there. And also still kind of while working on the disk-based option for Dqlite, we had a number of issues to look into, which led to us spending time around improving logging and tracing of Dqlite. So that's effectively adding a bunch of trace points. So you can use something like BPF trace to get both the user space side of Dqlite and Raft and the kernel side all in one log, making it very easy to see what's going on when a request goes through Dqlite. That makes it much easier to debug very complex environments where we're seeing like weird slowdowns or like problematic load, that kind of stuff. And other than that, there are two more items we're looking at doing around Dqlite. One of them is a rework of our documentation. That's going to be needed anyway after the C-client library, but there's also like a few more things that still need refreshing, and we want things to be nice and easy to understand once we've got the C-client library to really try and push for Dqlite adoption outside of the LXD projects that we have so far. And we also want to spend a bit more time on daily benchmarks. Currently we've got the benchmarking tool and we've got tests running daily on GitHub. But because those tests are not running on the exact same piece of hardware every day, the actual metrics we're getting out of that is kind of all over the place and mostly depends on the cloud load on a given day more than it does on the actual change of code. So we're going to be moving that to running on bare metal CI so that we get more useful data there. And that's pretty much it. Not mentioned there is also the fact that we did hire a new engineer on the LXD team recently who's going to be working on low-level projects for us. So that means LXC, LXCFS, some amount of kernel work, Creo, that kind of stuff. So that's really very exciting for us. Because of when it started, we didn't actually commit to any specific bit of work coming from that over the cycle. But you can expect issues on those different projects to be looked at pretty closely now as we're kind of going through the backlog and trying to get a clear picture of where we are so we can also prepare the roadmap for the next cycle. Also, just want to remind everyone how things work. LXD does a monthly feature release. And so those different bits you've seen here are going to be landing as they get ready. So usually in every feature release, we've got one or two of those kind of larger headline type features that get landed alongside a number of other fixes and smaller features and improvements that we're adding. The other thing I wanted to cover is where can you kind of keep track of what's going on. So on the forum, we've got a section called specifications, and most of those new larger features do get a dedicated specification for them. So as you can see here, we do have one for this, the new instance scheduler. There's one for a new ZFS block mode that's also being added right now. And yeah, in general, you can keep an eye on that, and you're gonna see the new features popping up there with the proposed design, and it's a great way to send early feedback before we go on to implementing them. Once we get onto implementation, you usually see a draft PR pop up on GitHub, so you can give some more feedback there if you want. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the LXD team is hiring, and we have another post here on the forum in the job section from our director of engineering who's covering the different positions that are currently being open. So we do have 2 positions open for management. So we're kind of restructuring the way we run the engineering squads within LXD. So it's going to be two squads here that are looking for managers right now. We also have some positions open for software engineers, so Go software engineers. If you're interested by any of those, you can read some more details there on that post, as well as how to reach out to us if you need any more details. If you've ever contributed to LXD in any way, we strongly recommend that you reach out to us before applying, just so we can make sure that we keep track of those contributions in notes within the hiring pipeline that we have. And that's it. Happy 2023. I think it's going to be a pretty exciting year for LXD. And yeah, quite looking forward to it, looking forward to the next few releases, and looking forward to interacting with you all. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to leave them down below in the comment section, or you can, especially for more specific topics, go and ask about that on our community forum. Again, to keep track of all the stuff we're doing, the best is to look at the specifications as they show up on the forum, or to look at GitHub for the actual code as it's being submitted. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.